Yeah, I was like, my mom told me I had to get out. My mom was the type like, yo, you turn 18, your grace period is from 20 is until age 21, and you got to get out. So what I did was instead of going into a full panic trying to find a job and all this, I went over to my girlfriend's house and and she's like, what's going on? I said, oh, nothing. My mom told me I got to get out tomorrow. And he found this one opportunity, which was John Sally, because John Sally had a recording studio and a record label called Hoop Sounds. And this was right
Mm.
after the second championship, right? For the Pistons. And so he got us a meeting. We went over there, did the meeting, and for some reason, John he asked me, like, do you sing? I said, yeah, but that's not my focus. I want to stay behind the scenes. I don't really want to be out front like that. I just write and produce the songs for these guys. But John kept saying, like, no, 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 I want to work with you. So
Ah,
he decided he wanted to work with me and not the group. And I realized that I needed to get some equipment. So I called my father's youngest sister, my Auntie Lynn, and asked her if she would um, co-sign on a $10,000 loan so I can get some equipment. And she co-signed for me, and then all I got with that $10,000, I got an MPC 62. I got it was this Kawai keyboard that I had, JD 800, I think it was, and I got two Yamaha powered speakers, and then I had another little, I had something, a keyboard stand. Basically, the whole 10,000 was that.
wow.
And the reason I got the MPC 62 is because I heard that's what Teddy Riley used. Hooked up, we gonna hook you up. They told me
Wow.
that in 1991. And then I didn't see them for, man, I didn't see them for a year and a half, maybe. I didn't hear from them. They were gone. Next door, call LA. He answers the phone. T Rich, what's up? Where you at? So I'm walking right behind you. I was right behind him. I said, man, let's go talk. So we went to the office and we talked, and I said, yeah, Richard said you was upset with me. He said, yeah, I heard such and such. I said, that's ironic. Because when I was out on the West Coast, someone was telling me he was talking shit about me. I said, so we're both hearing things, but we're right here.
Hey everyone, just want to welcome you to another edition of Halftime Chat. And again, I've got another special guest. As I said, all my guests are special, but I'm going to be joined by a singer, songwriter, producer, visual artist, Mr. Tony Rich. Um, Best for most of us, his debut song, a single, Nobody Knows, was a massive hit. And so we're just gonna, but he's released almost more than 7 albums, and he's also appeared in a movie, and he's got so much more he's done as a producer, and even and right now focusing a lot on his visual art. So join me as I talk to Tony about his career, his life, and his journey and what he's up to next. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, brother. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Doing well. I wasn't sure if you're on the East or West Coast.
East Coast for me.
Okay, okay,
I'm in South Florida.
okay. Nice and warm out there.
Oh,
I,
it's hot.
it's hot
It's
on
like
you.
it's like it's approaching hell degrees.
I said, yeah, I always remember going to Orlando Disney and felt like you just couldn't, it just was so humid, just too humid. I could not imagine having to live in Florida. And I get
I
afraid of
love
just the
it.
fact that alligators just
I
seem to
absolutely
come.
love it.
What about the alligators? Do they just come
Yeah.
out into people's yards, or is it you have to be further away from lakes?
Look, I've been here for 4 years. I haven't seen one.
Okay.
So it's no different than when I was living in Australia. I never saw a koala bear. I saw plenty of kangaroos, but I never saw a koala bear. I probably saw a huntsman spider twice. So none of the scary stuff that people typically attribute to certain areas, I rarely ever see it. So I have not seen a gator yet.
Okay. Well, I thought
Iguanas, yes, but not gator.
I think kangaroos seem to be they seem to be a little fierce as well, though.
They are. And the thing about it is that in Australia, there's more kangaroos than there are people.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, more kangaroos than people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yep.
Well, goodness, anyway, well, it's yeah. So whenever you said it'd be great just to get a picture. I mean, now you're saying in Florida, but I always start off international audience because even though I'm here in the UK, I've got
Yep.
people out in the States, Southeast, sorry, South Asia, or Africa watching in. So I always like to get where you were sort of born and raised, and so we kind of map your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan.
yeah.
So the Motor City.
The Motor City.
But by the time, so growing up, you absorbed being in Detroit, you're able to absorb not just the music, but also just like the knowledge of the history of the whole Motown era and all the artists that came out of Detroit. At the same time, growing up and witnessing very talented people in Detroit, right? But by the time I was of age to where I felt like I was ready to be a professional, I was 15, mind you, when I thought that.
Yeah.
Um, by that time, the a lot of the opportunities and a lot of the industry was not based in Detroit.
Oh,
So
snap.
you had to go elsewhere, or someone had to come through and recognize you and, sort of pull you out.
So did they move? What time? What year did Motown leave the Hitsville and the?
That was a long time ago, and I don't remember the exact date. I'd have to research
Were
that,
you still
but
around? I mean, were
I was a
they?
kid.
Yeah, you were a kid, so they would have still been around when you were growing up.
Yeah, I was a little kid. So by the time I was dabbling with music and on a serious level, there was no record industry in Detroit.
Uh,
The only thing
okay.
that was even like something that you could point to was Hitsville, the
And
museum.
oh, just
That's it. I mean, but there was plenty of recording studios, plenty of talent. Like Detroit is still like one of the most talented places as far as what you can find a lot of raw talent. It's just all
yeah,
about like, okay, how long will it take you to find it? Because the
yeah.
whole time Eminem was there, I was there. Um, these brothers named Tim and Ted, who wound up moving, they went down before me, my brother did, and they were the first two of the first producers to work with
Oh,
Usher.
Tim above me.
No, Tim and Ted.
Oh, there's somebody else. Okay.
Yeah, so there was a Tim and Ted and a Tim and Bob. Tim and Bob were coming from Chicago, but Tim and Ted were actually from Detroit.
Oh, from
But
Detroit.
by the time I met Tim and Bob, Tim and Ted were already down in Atlanta. They were
Okay.
at LaFace. Yeah.
Okay. Just going back a little bit though, I mean, how did you get into music as a kid? I mean, because I think for those of us who see America from the outside, it's a lot of sports
Yeah.
and stuff. But for you, why did you gravitate to music?
I think I can't say I have a definitive answer as to why I gravitate to music, other than I tend to believe that music is either in you or it's not,
Mm,
right? So if it's in you, it's all about like, okay, at what point, what's going to trigger it? Sort of like I have asthma. I've had it since I was a newborn, but it was triggered. And there was
mm.
an event that triggered it. Had that event not happened, I probably wouldn't deal with asthma. So I was just like watching, I mean, you had Stevie Wonder, you had the whole Motown era and all that. I always heard music. My mother always sung music, and my father listened to a lot of jazz, but my mom would listen to music, and it's to the point where we heard music so much it was almost as if she was singing it all, right? But it was always playing. So I think I want to say the first artist that I saw that inspired me in a way that made me want to get into music on the level of being a songwriter, producer, and a multi instrumentalist, that would have been Prince.
Wow.
Of course, you had Michael Jackson, but Michael Jackson was showing you a whole nother thing, like that the level of entertainment was just as an entertainer on the level that he was on, it was incredible. Prince was different because it was almost like with Prince, it was when he was on stage, it was almost like an example of like, or an extension of this is what I do in the studio, but here it is on stage. So I was fascinated with hearing one of his first interviews where he said that he had wrote all the songs and produced all the music. I was like, oh, that would be interesting. And I thought that was interesting because you wouldn't, if you made it, if you set it up that way, then you would not be completely dependent upon others to create or to finish an idea,
Yeah.
you know.
But
So
what
that's
came
how
first for you then? Did the singing come or playing the instruments?
I want to say for me, it was all of it. I was interested in singing and instruments at the same time. But of course, with the vocal being the most accessible instrument that we all have, because it's
Yeah.
built within us,
Yeah.
I started singing, you know. And it was ironic because my older brother Joe used to tease me when I was a kid. He used to say, "Man, you sound like a country singer when you sing." It was hilarious because I would just sing things that I like. And then once I started, my first instrument that my mother bought for me was actually um, it was a guitar actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I started out on guitar first, and then I moved to keyboard because my fingertips started to callus. I didn't like that, so I went to my brother. My brother's first instrument was keyboards. I said, "Bro, can you teach me how to play that keyboard? Because my fingertips are in pain." He says, "No, I'm not teaching you anything. So nobody taught me." I said, "Come on, man, please." He says, "No, you can watch, but teach yourself." So I taught myself.
Was your brother into singing and producing or as playing instruments or
We were all, me and my brother Joe were into the same things.
okay.
We were
Okay.
both into songwriting, singing, producing. But if you let him tell it, he will say that I took the lead on the singing and production part. Because when I would
Yeah. Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
No, because when I would create music, I would just create these interesting pieces of music, like instrumental pieces. And I had like when I first started writing songs, I had no structure. I was just going for whatever I felt. It was whatever it felt good to me.
Mm.
And it was my brother Joe who was the driver of structure, and song structure is important, and repetition, and he even taught me how to um, ad lib and harmonize because I just use my solo vocal. But when he taught me how to ad lib, he said, "Oh, you got to kind of like sing things in between what's being said in the chorus, and you got to sing this note on top of that note." So my brother was very instrumental in that. He did teach me things about vocals, but would not teach me anything about keyboards. So it was funny.
You know that it sounds very similar to another Detroit native, and that was when I interviewed Elder Barge, and he was very complimentary of his older brother, Bobby,
Right.
about he used to just write 13 verses in a song, and Bobby taught him the structure and stuff. And it's very
That's right.
fascinating how much older siblings play a part in teaching you and honing those skills at that early age.
Yeah.
At the time then but then if Prince was the sort of the blueprint of wow, you can write, produce, sing, and perform all the instruments vocally, who was the person that you sort of leaned to when you were sort of crafting your singing voice as a child, as a
Well,
teenager?
when it came to vocals, Prince, when you think about Prince as an artist, he was very vocally expansive, far as ranges. Like Prince speaking voice was like Barry White,
Yeah, yeah, I've
you
heard,
know.
yeah.
Like when I would talk to him on the phone, it was the funniest thing because I knew on the other end he was sitting there with in full makeup, glitter on his face and everything, but his voice was like Barry White. And as you know, he could sing in very low register all the way up to a very clear falsetto and everything in between. So with the thing about vocal range is you have to find your range, right? So I would any voice that I heard that I liked, I could mimic the voice, like if I was
Mm,
singing the song, right? So I
mm,
remember in marching band, I used to sing for the girls. On the piano, I would sing Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson, right? So what I learned at a very early age was that, wow, the voice is an instrument that can be manipulated in so many different ways. There's so many
Mhm.
different tones and different like vocal acrobatics that you can do. And my whole thing was my focus was I just wanted to craft this really interesting tone of voice that was easy for me to access and easy for me to sing repeatedly because I was always aware of the asthma issues. So that means breathing issues, right?
Yeah,
So
okay.
that's one of the main reasons why I was never a person as an artist that was going to be on stage dancing. I was like, no,
Okay.
I can't do that. That would not have been a good move for me. So I knew that the instruments that I played, that I could do this well off into my old age, as long as I could sit down and pick up an instrument, I'm good.
Oh, okay. So for you then it was
That's why I
okay.
didn't do that.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
okay. So hence you didn't go the Michael Jackson route. You kind of went there. Okay.
That's right.
What about the opportunity to play as a sort of school? A lot of us from the outside would see American artists. I think especially the artists that came out in the 90s, they were honing their skills in church while some were doing it in school. For yourself, if because it
Right.
feels as if the competition is there, it feels as if the excellence is there. So you kind of almost if you can do it in those environments, you can do it anywhere. For yourself, where was your honing of those skills before when you were teenager and learning how to sing and perform?
Well, me and my brother Joe were like, um, we were such re we fell in the category of being a recluse, right? To the point where I have three brothers, there's four of us. But in our neighborhood, people thought that my mom only had three boys because me and my brother Joe would never be seen leaving together or coming home. So it would like if I left out, then someone would see him come in. They thought me and my brother Joe was the same person because we look a lot alike.
Okay.
But my brother is like twice my size. He's a very muscular guy. If you can imagine me, just imagine me how I would look on steroids and I'm all buffed up. That's my brother. And so, but back then we were relatively the same size, but we look a lot alike. We almost look like twins. So we spent a lot of time inside and I wasn't the kind of kid that was at a certain point. Once I started dabbing with music, I wasn't outside a lot.
Wow.
So I had a lot of time to experiment. And then we were always sort of involved in some type of jazz fusion band or something. And then I would get my hands on like if I could convince that the whoever was running the band, if we could do the rehearsals at my place, at my mom's place, then the equipment would stay there. And then that gave me an opportunity to um, sort of like dabble with things and figure things out. And that's where I honed skills. It was just like I would find myself in my basement, a bunch of equipment, and then I would figure it out. No
Wow.
instruction booklet. I would just by trial and error. That's it.
I mean, so if you go back to that time, then what was the thoughts longer term? Was it just as a way of keeping out of trouble, being out on the streets, and this is a fun little hobby? But when I grow up, I'm going to go work in a bank. What was at when you were a
Oh no,
teenager?
absolutely. Like here was my approach. Before the age of 15, I was like, I'm going to school for architecture design, right? Because that was a natural gift that we knew that we had from our father. My father was a visual artist, but
Oh,
our father was also a musician and a theater actor. We didn't know about the musician or the theater actor aspect until after we started playing instruments. And then our father came over one day and could actually sit down at the keyboard and play better than we could. Then we were like, oh, that's where that came from, you know? So
okay.
yeah, that was so I had decided that by the time I was 15 years old, I remember my band teacher, Mr. Nicholson, he was an awesome man. He said, "So, young man, are you going to college?" I said, "Look, I'm not. I changed my mind. I have another plan." He says, "What's the plan?" I said, "Listen, it's by the time it takes all of my classmates to graduate high school, go to college, study, and for whatever the degree it is that they want to do, whatever they want to do in life, I said, in that same amount of time, I will be a professional in the music business. I told him that at age 15. And he kind of chuckled at me, but like almost just like, okay, young man, you got some audacity. But he wasn't laughing at me like because I
Yeah.
was the one student in the marching band that when he had an external gig outside of school where he had to go and play the song Danny Boy on trumpet. And
Mm.
he asked me to play piano for him. And I did. At 15 years old, there I was playing, accompanying my band teacher at a like a public gig, right? It was really I was nervous, but it was cool though. But I told him that's what I was going to do. So I graduated high school in 1993, and by March, no, I graduated high school in 1989. By 1993, March of 1993, I was in Atlanta, you know? So, and the way that that came about was Tim and Bob. So, and so I graduated high school 89. So I was 17. And then by 91 is when I met Tim and Bob. And I was working, I used to be in this group. I used to write and produce songs for this group. And this group, one of the guys in the group, his brother was our quasi manager, so to speak. Well, not quasi. He did. He managed us. He did his whatever he could, whatever opportunities he could find. And he found this one opportunity, which was John Sally, because John Sally had a recording studio and a record label called Hoop Sounds. And this was right
Mm.
after the second championship, right? For the Pistons. And so he got us a meeting. We went over there, did the meeting, and for some reason, John he asked me, like, do you sing? I said, yeah, but that's not my focus. I want to stay behind the scenes. I don't really want to be out front like that. I just write and produce the songs for these guys. But John kept saying, like, no, 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 I want to work with you. So
Ah.
he decided he wanted to work with me and not the group. He wanted me to produce tracks for him. So I was like, okay, cool. And so from that point, I started going to the studio every day, and I realized that I needed to get some equipment. So I called my father's youngest sister, my Auntie Lynn, and asked her if she would um, co-sign on a $10,000 loan so I can get some equipment. And I didn't have no job. I mean, all I had was $1,000 that John had paid me as to start, producing tracks for him. And she co-signed for me, and then all I got with that $10,000, I got an MPC 62. I got it was this Kawai keyboard that I had, JD 800, I think it was, and I got two Yamaha powered speakers, and then I had another little, I had something, a keyboard stand. Basically, the whole 10,000 was that.
Wow.
And the reason I got the MPC 62 is because I heard that's what Teddy Riley used. And he's a friend of mine now, but back then he wasn't. I didn't know him. He was just someone I wanted to meet. I said I was going to meet him, so I was like, "Yo, I got this," because I remember Kern and Valdez. They're based in Detroit as well. They had MPC 60s, so I'm like, "Yo, I got to have this, right?" So then I'll never forget when Tim and Bob came through the studio. They came through the studio by way of this other guy who owned another studio across the way. He was bringing them by to show off that, hey, check out my producers from Chicago. So John is like, yeah, this is my guy. This is my guy from Detroit. And as soon as me and Tim and Bob met, we was just like, we clicked because we just loved each other's music so much. I just thought that what they did was so unique. They thought what I did was so unique. And that was that. That's how we met. And through that little period of time, they were like, yo, man, when we get down to Atlanta, because Tim was like, yo, my girl, my girl's cousin is T-Bob's. And so we going down there for a meeting. When we get down there, man, we get hooked up. We gonna hook you up. They told me
Wow.
that in 1991. And then I didn't see him for, man, I didn't see them for a year and a half, maybe. I didn't hear from them. They were gone. John got traded, so the studio was shut down. And then I started
Oh.
working at the studio. I started working at the studio that Tim and Bob used to work at. And while I was there, I was working with Brown Mark from the Revolution.
Mm.
Brown Mark was in town, and me and Brown Mark was working on music for Dietrich Haddon. Bob mentioned Dietrich Haddon. Dietrich
Yeah,
Haddon
yeah,
is a
yeah.
gospel artist, but Dietrich is a very talented guy. But we were working on this music for him, which wasn't necessarily gospel. It's more like, inspirational
Inspiration
pop.
like BB and CC kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I was like, so I was working at that studio for about 6 months. And then I'll never forget, my mother told me, because at this time I was 21 and it was March, like third week of March. My mom's like, yo, you got to get out of here. It's time for you to be a man. You got to go tomorrow.
What?
So here I am. Yeah, I was like, my mom told me I had to get out. My mom was the type like, yo, you turn 18, your grace period is from 20 is until age 21, and you got to get out. So what I did was, instead of going into a full panic trying to find a job and all this, I went over to my girlfriend's house, and and she's like, what's going on? I said, oh, nothing. My mom told me I got to get out tomorrow. So then when it was time for me to leave, I called a friend of mine to see if he can swoop me up. He said, well, I'm in that area, but me and my brother and my sister, we're out filling out applications. You want to fill out an application? I said, no, bro. He said, you sure? I said, bro. He said, did you say your mom putting you out tomorrow? I said, yeah, man, but I'm a musician. That's how I make money. If I'm not doing music, I'm not doing anything else. So
Wow.
when you ask the question, like it wasn't like I had no alternatives. Once I aborted the idea of doing architecture design, it was all music. So I said, listen, this is what it is. So they dropped me off. I ride with them while they fill out applications. And then they keep asking, sure you don't want? No, bro, I'm good. I appreciate the ride home though. Drop me off at home. And as soon as I walk in the door, my younger brother, my baby brother, Robert, comes to me. He says, somebody named Tim called you? And I was like, Tim? And this is landline. There was no cell
Yeah,
phones
yeah,
back
yeah,
then.
yeah.
Landlines. I was like, what? So he didn't leave a number. And even if he did leave a number, I was afraid to call him back because my mom was like, yo, don't make no long distance calls. Tim called me back within 15 minutes and he said, yo, we about to hook you up. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then they said, we're gonna call you right back. Before they said they're gonna call me right back, they put Dallas Austin on speakerphone. So
And you know
I
who he
briefly
was.
spoke with Dallas. Yeah, I knew who he was as far as what he did, but I was like, it was very brief. We spoke for 30 seconds maybe. And then they said, yo, we're gonna call you right back when we get over to this other meeting. I said, all right, cool. So I'm just waiting by the phone. Just wait. Because I could feel that this was it. Then they called me from Perry's office, Pebbles. And they said, yo, this is all they said. Because Tim and Bob back then, they always called us, if they really loved the song, they always called it a flight.
Wow.
Okay. Because Tim and Bob, um, whenever they heard a song, they like, yo, man, play that flight. And so this is Tim. Tim says, yo, P, play that flight just a little. I said, word? Here it is. I'm playing a cassette tape through a landline phone that's coming out through a speaker landline phone in Atlanta. Not even, I think it got to the chorus, and then everybody just starts screaming, losing their mind. And then I hear this sweet voice say, hey, you want to come to Atlanta? And I said, yes, just like that. And I said, when? She says, we're going to see if we can get you here today. I was like, now I'm nervous, my heart's beating. Then they come to find out as soon as they can get me was the very next day. So I called my girlfriend. Hey, remember what I told you? I was moving to Atlanta? Because I used to say I was moving to Atlanta way before I even met Tim and Bob. And I
Wow.
didn't know why. I didn't know anybody down in Atlanta. So I called my girlfriend, told her I was leaving. She was like, really? I said, yeah, I'll be back to get you. Called my Auntie Lynn. My Auntie Lynn said she would take me to the airport. I'd never been on a plane before. And she brought me a garment bag because I didn't have a suitcase because I never traveled. And then boom, the next day I was in Atlanta. meeting with Pebbles. And then she
Oh no,
said,
before
you
you
know what?
get
I
there,
think that,
just before you
yeah,
get there, was this the same day that your mom said you had to leave? That all this happened?
this was the next day.
Oh, the next day.
My mom, the day that I flew to Atlanta was the day I was supposed to be leaving my mother's house.
Wow.
It was right on time.
What did when you relayed all this back to mom, what did she how did she take it?
When I told I was going to
Yeah,
Atlanta,
that this these guys have called
oh,
and
she was, see, my mom never really doubted my ability to, she knew I was consistently walking around her house for months saying, Mom, I'm rich, you just can't see my money yet. And my mom would be like, yeah, but I can see these bills. You know what I'm saying? I hear what you're saying, but I got bills to pay. So I was just like, hey, don't worry about it. Everything's gonna be fine. And so when I was gone, I was gone. And then when Pebbles told me, hey, I think that you'll be better suited working with my husband. And I'm like, word? She said, yeah, hold on, let me call him real quick. She gets on the phone. She said, okay, they're waiting for you. So somebody rushes me right next door because their office buildings were right next door to each other.
oh, you know who her
LA,
husband was?
huh?
You knew who her husband was. You knew
Yeah,
who
I know it was LA. So I
okay.
was just like, all right, cool. So I walk in there and LA was meeting with his brother Bryant. And I'm sitting there and I play some songs for him. And then I played this song called Long Way to Travel, which was written by me and my brother Joe. And my brother Joe, I was terrified to play, but I had to because he said, never play any of my tracks if I'm not around. But I had to play it because I knew what I was doing. Because I told LA, said, yeah, I mean, me and my brother, we're we're writing production team. We weren't, but
Yeah.
we had that one song wrote together. So as a result of that, LA flew my brother down the next day. And
Wow.
that's how we got started. Yeah, that's how we got started. And Perry Pebbles had us in a hotel for like 6 months while we was working out the details of our production deal and publishing deal stuff. And then we got to rolling. And matter of fact, the first artist that I worked with was Pebbles. That was the first artist I produced
So, so,
professionally.
so I guess just quickly then, and because I know how you were telling the story, but when you got the call from Tim and you flew out, what did you tell Joe? What was he doing? Was he still living at home with your mom, or was he working? And was Joe doing?
Joe was at the time he was at my mom's place off and on, right? Sometimes he would be at home, sometimes he'd be at my aunt's place. But when I called and told him, yo, bro, they about to fly you down. My brother was nervous because my brother is extremely terrified of planes. So I was like, bro, you got to get on the plane.
I'll take the
Come on, man, they send
Greyhound.
you info. He says, why? What happened? I said, man, I played Long Way to Travel for him. He's like, what? So that's how we got started. That
Wow.
was it. And that happened around March 23rd in 1993.
The other question I had then
That's how we
is,
did it.
I mean, you have an amazing aunt that co-signed. I mean, that really took that risk.
Yeah.
Um, when you told her that this was going on, how was her reaction? Yeah, Auntie Lynn.
You gotta understand, my Auntie Lynn told me a long time before that, do whatever you want to do in life. She said, as long as you don't hurt yourself and you don't hurt anybody, um, your gifts will make room for you.
Wow.
And she gave me that garment bag to put my clothes in, and she handed me a Napoleon Hill book, Think and Grow Rich.
Wow.
And she said, I love you. And she said, do good. That was it. And then I got on the plane. And then when I went back, me and my brother went back the first time. When we first went back to Detroit, that was months later. We were going back to get the rest of our things. And that was it.
What happened to your MPC and the $10,000 worth of
On
equipment?
NPC, oh, all of that. So that's what we went back to get. We went back and had all of our equipment shipped back. So
Okay.
we had our whole full individual setup set up in the hotel room
Wow.
on the beds. We would set them on the bed. That was our keyboard stand. And then when we would go out to get something to eat or whatever, we'd take everything apart, put it in the closet, But yeah, it was amazing.
Wow.
It
I
was
mean,
just amazing how that
it
happened.
that seems to be amazing sort of destiny, faith that it's all happened. the timing
Yep.
of everything like that. Um, but for yourself, all that time before you got the call from Pebbles and Tim, were you still thinking producer, songwriter, and not artist? So
I
what
was
was your
thinking it
vision?
all. It was
Okay, the
all.
Prince kind of.
I was going to do it all. It's just that when I once I got to Atlanta and Perry had suggested that I work with her husband, I was like, she also suggested a couple other things, which was she said, I think that you should focus primarily on songwriting, producing first and establish yourself that way. And then if you still want to do the artist thing, then you do it. So I followed her advice. She always gave great advice. And I listened to her because I was raised by women. So I tend to feel extremely comfortable around women and any advice is coming from women. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. And that's what I did. I focused on writing for other people. So I started writing and producing for other people, starting with her. And then she had a group called 4.0 that she was developing. I helped work on that. It was myself and Organized Noise was working on them as well. And then from there, I did Tony Braxton. I was just working on different artists and then Boys to Men. And then by the time that happened, it was then I was just curious about, let me see if I'm gonna do a record like
Okay,
that.
no. So I guess just because you kind of jumped in quick, so because you've moved to Atlanta and was the sort of mecca of music out in the South, and they, anything they most of what they put out was successful. For you, did you just see yourself like, when you're seeing these artists like the TLCs and stuff? Are you able to separate the celebrity stuff and just think, okay, I've got my job to do? How was that adjustment? Because you're coming from you're just me. I don't I have no idea what it's like just coming in and seeing all these famous people, Pebbles, seeing the legendary
Well,
L.A.
it
Reid. I
was a
mean,
different reaction. Right. It was okay. I'll tell you this. That's a great question, by the way. It's like because before I got into business, I had a list in my mind of people that I was going to meet, not in a can you listen to my demo type of fashion. I said there was a list of producers that I said I was going to meet eye to eye, man to man, on a very respectful level. And that was Prince, Teddy Riley, um, Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, Dr. Dre, LA and Babyface, Quincy Jones. Well, I just so happened to meet LA first. I never worked with Babyface ever. I've been in his presence 2 times for maybe 5 minutes at the most. Spoke to him on the phone one time for about 3 minutes. But LA, I was around and we spent a lot of time together working on music and different projects, overseeing projects and things like that. And it was like with Pebbles, of course, I'm 21 years old. I've only seen this woman on TV and doing
mhm,
records. And when you meet her in person, it's like her vibe, she's like angelic and she's gorgeous, but she's
mhm.
just a beautiful spirit. She made it, quite honestly, she made it very easy to be around all of that
Wow.
because she sounded like the way she spoke to me was like one of my aunts. So my mother's speaking to me. So I instantly felt safe and like, oh, okay, cool. And she's very hospitable and she just looked after us. And she was always teaching me things. So that was easy. Once I was around LA for the first time, he was super chill and he had a great sense of humor. So I didn't have a shock because in my mind, prior to that, I never asked someone for an autograph because I always felt like, no, I'm going to be in that industry.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let me not subject people to that. So it was all pretty, it was normal to me. It was like when I was around those people, I felt like I was supposed to be at that time.
I think one of the things that you're saying about Pebbles, because some of us know Pebbles from her career, this gorgeous model who sang and had those hit records, and then then the next part was sort of how TLC presented her. And but what is fascinating is that you, from the beginning, spoke about how much she was giving of teaching you about the business and even guidance, and it's very unfortunate that that element of Pebbles sort of gets missed out, doesn't get from shared, um, because she didn't need to do that. But it, but
She's a lovely person. I only have awesome, beautiful things to say about her because she was the first person I could actually refer to as being like a sister to me. She's very protective. She told me, I remember one time she said, never count another man's pocket. I remember, I'll never forget that. Another one she told me was when it came down to like letting other writers write on my tracks because I had all these like I would write on my tracks, but I had a bunch of them that didn't have anything on it. I remember one time she said, 50% of a smash is better than 100% of nothing. I was like, oh, that was deep. So she said, any tracks that you have that you don't have nothing written on it, send it to somebody else. So I said, okay. So she suggested I send something to this guy named Mark Nelson, who's a songwriter that was signed to
yeah,
Universal Music
yeah.
Publishing. So I send a track to Mark Nelson. He sends back a song. That song was called Come On Over Here. LA heard it. He said, yo, we should put this on Tony Braxton. That's how that happened. I wasn't trying to get on the Tony Braxton album. It's just that that song was written. Like I wrote the track for myself,
Mm,
but I couldn't hear anything on it. So I sent it to Mark. Mark puts the song on it, and then we put it on Tony Braxton.
wow.
That's how that happened.
Yeah. Uh,
It was interesting, but she was I just can't I will never forget the lessons that she taught me because it was just very valuable lessons. And when she told me that, I was like, wow. She said, because what's old to you is new to someone else. And
wow.
so I only have and look, I can't speak for experiences that or perceptions that people may have of her.
Mm,
I know what my experience was with her. And while I was experience every experience I had with her, I also watched how she treated people around us. And
yeah.
she was the mother of it all. Like when I say that, meaning like LaFace would not have had me, TLC, Outkast, Organized Noise, none of that. So the majority of that roster wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for Perry.
Yeah, I think that's it. She gets left out of the story,
I
unfortunately.
know.
With
Because Perry, if it wasn't for Perry, Organized Noise wouldn't have been over there. If Organized Noise wasn't there, they wouldn't have been Outkast, the Goody Mob, or none of that stuff.
oh, so she discovered she brought them, other Rico and Wade, she brought them.
Yes, because Rico Wade is the person that actually put TLC together. He just didn't want no credit for it. And then you had Ian Burke. Ian Burke was involved. He managed them. And you know, it's really interesting because the way some of these things come together, it's like it's more than one person that plays a part.
Yeah.
So you had Rico played his part, Ian played his part, and then Perry did her thing. But
Mm,
all of that, it was all prepackaged. So LaFace was just the machine to put the record out and put the marketing and all that,
yeah.
everything that goes behind creating that stardom. So they all work together. And the
Yeah.
same thing, like Perry flew me down. Perry looked after me and my brother for 6 months before we did our deal with LaFace. And then she basically like just handed me over. And boom, there I was. And so from that, so what comes from the Tony Rich project? Nobody knows, which was written by my older brother Joe, which is a
Yeah.
song about our father.
Yeah, okay. Before so we're gonna get we're gonna get there. So
You know?
you started off working on Perry's album. Um, how was that process then? You know, for somebody who's been like a old big sister, now you're working on her album. Are you able to in the studio tell her, okay, sing it again? I like that note. Or how does that being a producer for an established artist become?
Well, that's a good question because I would suggest that back then I would always tell people like, yo, if your first artist should be one that challenges you, it's going to teach you more. So
Mm.
Perry knew exactly what she wanted to do in the studio. Like, so when we were working on, reel to reel 2-inch tape back then, it we would have like sometimes we would have maybe 2 to 3 reels that was just her vocals. Perry liked to put down every vocal idea that she heard, which is
Right.
something that I still do to this day. So it would just be like tapes of vocals. And we would then have to comp through all that stuff, sift through it, and find out what worked because she loved overlapping things. But she wasn't hard to work with. It was just a lot of work that went into working with her. And when it came to vocals, music
Mm.
wise, no, she let you do your thing, but it wasn't a scary thing at all. It was cool because she was very professional at doing what she does. She worked at her own pace, and primarily we were working out of their home studio. So it
Uh,
wasn't like the clock was ticking a whole lot. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
There was a lot more ease in when it came down to working with her. I enjoyed working with her.
Okay. And so is it after you finish? So after you finish on her working on her, do they put you on TLC or how do they decide? So, okay, what's the kind of direction of work to come your way?
Well, at LaFace at that time, it was almost like each artist had a primary producer, so to speak. Like when it came to TLC, that's Dallas.
Okay.
Okay. If you get something on TLC, that's after Dallas has done the majority of it. When it came to Toni Braxton, that was Babyface. If you
Oh,
got
down.
something on her, that was after the fact, right?
Yeah.
At some point, Usher became Jermaine's project,
Oh,
right?
after the whole, yeah.
So to get something on there it was after they've done it, right? It's just like when you look at TLC's Waterfalls. Organized Noise produced one record on it. On Toni Braxton's Secret album, I produced one record on it because the majority of that was done by Babyface. So that's sort of like kind of like how it was. And then I would and see I was quite honestly I was picking up a lot of work that LA didn't want to do because he was focused on running the label. So
Oh,
it's like I heard when Bob mentioned that about the Boys to Men project. I wasn't in that conversation with Tim and Bob with the boys. So I can't say what was said in that conversation.
mm,
But what I do know, I know Bob to be a pretty stand-up guy, and he's going to be pretty fucking accurate, right?
mm,
And so I said, I remember LA coming to me and saying, "Hey man, the boys called me." I said, "Boys?" He said, "Boys to Men." Because once he and LA had split, once Babyface and LA had split, they were getting individual calls for production. So he says, "Hey, you remember that song I Sit Away that you played for me?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You should put that on the boys." I said, "All right, cool." That's how that came about.
wow.
And but I know that what was the other one? And then from there, I wind up doing Johnny Gill because of the Boys to Men thing. And once he heard Boys to Men, and it kind of like went from there. And then once I put my album out, then it was a whole totally different caliber of artist that would
Yeah.
want to work with me.
It's because you go from Pebbles, now you're working with Boys to Men, um, who, we think of En Vogue and we see in Boys to Men as how their range was. For you as a producer and and songwriter and a singer, what was that like recording for those guys? Because they were really at their peak when they were doing the two album.
It was slightly intense at first. So what it was that LA, while I was recording their vocals, LA probably sat at the console for about 30 seconds a couple times. And he came in and told me, he said, "Look, man, I'm gonna just be in and out just so the boys feel comfortable because you're a brand new producer." Like, no problem, right? But I had to sit in there with him. And it was cool because Wanye was very easygoing and Sean and Wanye were very, very easygoing. Nate was a lot more serious, you know,
It's,
and Michael was just like very quiet, right? So it's like you had four different types of personalities, and so they would it was cool. It was like it was an easy session to do, and we got it done. And it was like that was the first album that I was a part of. And then when I say meaning like because I knew the company that I was keeping on that record. I'm like, yes, I want to do Boys and Men. Why? Because Tim and Bob was on there, Troy and
ah,
Charles, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis,
mm,
Babyface. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, yo, in LA Reid, it's going to be great. So I'm like, yeah, this is dope. So I understood, I had a different understanding back then at that age. Because I'm like, I don't care if my song is a single or not. This album is about to do, they're about to sell a lot of records. That means a
yeah,
lot of people are going to hear my song
yeah,
because it was number five. Like it wasn't that deep into the album. So I was like, yeah, that's the way
yeah.
I saw it. And then I understood publishing. I'm like, they're going to pay me 8 cents for that song per album. 18 million albums. I'm like, that's a good payday. So I didn't
Yeah.
care about no single.
Then I guess who taught you that element of the business? Because I guess those who come in as songwriters, producers have a very different education about the business compared to if you came in as a recording artist. Who
Mhm.
educated you on the percentages and publishing and things like that?
My attorney, Raj Jones, and Perry. I learned a lot. See, a lot of stuff that I learned about the music business came from women. And so and then also I would study my contracts. I knew how to read contracts. I knew how to negotiate contracts. So it's just like with my first album, I didn't do a budget. I did a fund because my attorney said like, hey, if you do a fund, you control it. So so the difference between a fund and a like an all-in fund and a budget would be if you got a budget, then you would go to the studio and then the studio would invoice the record label. It could get out
Mhm.
of hand. But if you do an all-in fund, whatever the amount is, say if it's $250,000, they give you the 250. And then you figure out. And when you got the money, you're going to find ways to save money. So I only spent maybe 25,000 to record words. I spent 60,000 to mix it. That's it. That album didn't cost $100,000 to make.
Yeah, but okay. I've had about 130 guests. Um, Joyce Sims is probably the one of the few guests who read, studied her book about the business and made sure she handled the stuff. But
Yeah.
most everyone says, yeah, it was the 90s. We took the hits and we had to learn. Um, what was different for you that actually, what, you're not just overwhelmed by the industry and just excited being there, that you actually paid attention to the business alongside the craft. How did you manage to do what most people weren't doing back in those days?
I listened to female energy. That was it. That was part of the key for me because when women care for you, women have extremely strong intuition. They can see where you can go wrong. And if they love you, they're going to tell you, avoid that, do this. That was it. That made a world of difference for me because I actually listened. And I was just like, okay. And I didn't get caught up in the hype, right?
Mm.
Because I understood early on that when an artist is being promoted, it's hype. Just like a movie. You ever saw like an ad for a movie and you haven't even seen the movie yet, but
Yeah.
somebody is saying it's the movie of the year? Are you like I haven't seen it yet. It's plenty of people haven't seen it. So I never believed the hype. I always knew that I was good at what I did.
Mm.
Otherwise, these people wouldn't be paying me to do it. But what I understood, the other part of the game was is that okay, every artist has an audience. It's just all about how many, like how big is the audience?
Mm.
That's why I could never critique someone else's creativity, because if someone likes it, someone is buying it, someone's listening, someone's following.
Mm.
It's just variety. You're one of the many flavors in creativity. And that's that. And so I just never got caught up in none of that stuff where I was so preoccupied on being famous. I didn't want to be famous. I just wanted to create music and do my best to avoid people as much as possible, because I wasn't really a people person like that, right? But
Yeah.
I had to do a crash course of like, okay, I have to interact with people.
Yeah.
So even when I came down to like being an artist, man, it's like I never hired no security people and created all that stuff around me. I could walk anywhere and do anything by myself. It was all good. Nobody really believed it was me anyway, because they're like, there's no security guards. I'm like, I don't need all that. If I wanted to feel more secure, I'd just take my brothers with me on the road, because guess what they're gonna do? Somebody approached me wrong, they're gonna knock them out, and I don't, whether there's a check in their hand or not. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So I just kept it real like that. I never forgot who helped me. Oh, like still to this day, like whenever I haven't seen Perry in some years, but whenever I see her, I say thank you. Whenever I see Tim and Bob, I saw I saw Tim more recently than I've seen Bob, but whenever I see them, I always tell them thank you.
Mm.
Um, Whenever I see LA, I tell him thank you, which always comes after he bows. He does this, and he'll say, "You're a godsend." And I say, "Thank you for everything you did for me." That's it. So I always
Yeah.
keep it real. I just never got caught up in that stuff. And I always studied and I wanted to understand the business and how it worked. So I was not one of those artists that was having money issues with the label. Never. I
Yeah.
always made money up front.
And then so I mean, but this is also very important for us to really help clarify the character of Pebbles Perry, because I
Mhm.
think the notion of, the notion was always, if she's doing this for you, why wouldn't she do it for everyone else? The lawyer, because other guests have said, oh yeah, the label brought the lawyer, and the lawyer sort of works for the label and sort of said, yeah, this is standard. How you mentioned Rashida, like you had a really good lawyer who really educated you on that. Were you instructed to find your own lawyer, or how did you even get somebody that will actually could teach you and explain stuff and wasn't afraid of upsetting the label?
You know what's so funny is that the very first attorney that we worked with, me and my brother, when we were working on our deal with LaFace, that attorney was recommended to us by the LaFace attorney.
Good
We only
number.
used her. Get this. We used her to negotiate our production deal and our publishing deal. When the publishing deal was done, I remember sitting in the studio at LA and he says, "Hey, so everything cool? You guys cool with the publishing deal?" He says, "Because if it's not, you just let me know because I want you guys to be happy." I said, "All right." I said, "I don't like the publishing deal." He says, "Okay, what do you not like about it?" I told him. And he says, "Done. I'll call and make the changes. They'll draw up an amendment, and then you guys go down and sign it." So I told my brother about it. My brother was like, "Word?" So what happened? I said, "Man, we were just having a conversation." And he asked me if I liked it. I said I didn't like it. So then when we go to sign the amendment doesn't say what he and I discussed. It was actually a much better deal than what we had discussed. So I said, "Bro, we can't sign this. This is," because I'm just trying to be honorable, right? I'm like, I don't think we can't sign this, bro. My brother was like, "Bro, more for us. Sign it and left the office." So I called LA and said, "Listen, man, we here sign this amendment, but this is not what we discussed." He said, "What does it say?" And I told him. He said, "Well, that's even better." Just like that.
Wow.
So the thing is, the music business is a ruthless business. And some people do some pretty crazy things to creative people, and sometimes they don't. And you can get like a mixed bag of things. It is very possible that the person that did right by you can turn around and then do something wrong. I'm not saying that they can't. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
But I know that I never witnessed Perry doing anything crazy. She definitely didn't do anything crazy to me.
Yeah.
Because if that was the case, she would have signed me to her production company
Mhm.
and sent me over to LaFace. She didn't do that. I never signed anything with her. I was
Yeah.
raw talent, and she basically said, like, I think you should work with my husband. And that was that.
What is it? What was it about you, if you reflect back on your personality or about yourself, that you think people like Perry and LA warmed to and were willing to make sure that you were taken care of, almost as if you were one of their family? Because you're describing two different people, a label executive and two different label executives who could easily have just taken advantage, but they saw something in you, not just your talent, that they felt that we need to look after you, change the contract if need be, like, go work with my husband because he can open bigger doors. That doesn't necessarily happen unless they said, this is your long lost son. And it's like, okay, we're going to give you all that. So what do
Yeah.
you think was about
You know what?
you?
All I could say about me, and it's always been the case. I've always been very mature for my age.
Okay.
And I was 21 at the time when I first got into business. I'm 52 now. I was also at a very young age, I was a young man. I was a real man. I didn't take no shit. So what happens is that if I felt like someone was doing something sideways, I'd approach them. I'd confront them right then and there. And that was that, and it wasn't like I remember this one time this guy used to be a business manager. I was talking with him and he said, "Hey man, I heard LA is upset with you." I said, "About what?" And he says, "Oh, he said he heard you was talking stuff about him." I was like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'll be right back." I go next door, call LA. He answers the phone. "T Rich, what's up? Where you at?" So I'm walking right behind you. I was right behind him. I said, "Man, let's go talk." So we went to the office and we talked, and I said, "Yeah, Richard said you was upset with me." He said, "Yeah, I heard such and such." I said, "That's ironic, because when I was out on the West Coast, someone was telling me you was talking shit about me." I said, "So we're both hearing things, but we're right here. Let's talk." I was always like that. I was not a confrontational person. But my whole thing is if I had a friendship with someone, I'm gonna keep it real and approach it like that. Perry always knew I was her little brother. I was
Mm.
protective of her just like she was protective of me. So all I can tell you is that there's nothing about me that says that that I'm for games and that I need to be played with. That doesn't deter someone from trying to shiv you in the back on some shit or whatever. But the thing about it is I was always pretty upfront. It wasn't like there was no like even when I left LaFace, there was no fighting, nothing like that. That was a result of me and LA having conversations.
Mm.
We wasn't yelling at each other, none of that crazy stuff. Because I just never brought that energy. That's all I could think of it is that I had a different energy about me. And and that's always been the case.
And I think that's the thing you mentioned about that energy, because I think um, if somebody gets a different energy, if you're not there like wilding out and frivolous with your stuff, um, I think it's a vibe that somebody just wants to do good about you. They don't know what it is, but I'm going to look after them, because that doesn't happen to everyone. Um,
True.
I remember hearing Ken Clark, DJ Ken Clark, saying that he was working at a lecturer and he saw the contracts given to the artist that he was trying to sign, and he didn't like the deal. He went back to Sylvia Rowan to say, "Hey, these contracts aren't that great for these guys." He says, "Well, it's their job to know the business, and if they don't want to learn it, then that's their problem. You don't, And so it was that sense of, wow. um, but so that's the impression we were getting, especially among Black artists, is that they were fair game to be taken advantage of. But I guess if you come with a very different spirits and very different vibe, people might just draw
Hmm.
to you and actually, you know what, we're going to do right by you. Um,
You know what's funny? One of the funniest meetings I ever had was with Clarence Avant. Like
everyone from,
before
yeah, they talk about
like
him.
before I met Clarence Avant, before I met him, LA told me. He says, "One day I'm gonna introduce you to Clarence Avant." I said, "Who's Clarence Avant?" He said, "He's like the Black Godfather." He
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
You might need him one day." So he said he's gonna introduce me. I said, all right, cool. So we were all out in LA during the Waterfalls video shoot.
Okay.
And me and LA are standing outside the Four Seasons Hotel. A group of us, we're about to head over to the sound stage. And he walks me over to Clarence Ava. He says, Clarence, this is the kid I was telling you about. This is Tony Rich. Clarence Ava never looked at me. He kept his eyes on LA and he said, and who is this little motherfucker? Is he gonna make me some motherfucking money? Get this motherfucker out of my face. And he walked away and got in his Rolls Royce and pulled off. And I looked at LA and was like, yo, what is that about? He told me, it's Clarence. I see Clarence maybe 2 or 3 months later at the Motown office. I was meeting with Andre Harrell. Clarence sitting in the office. And Andre's like, so Tony, what you want to do, man? What kind of deal can we do? And Clarence says, whatever the deal is, it comes through me because I manage him. And I said, Clarence, do you remember what you said to me the first time we met? And I told him, and he said, Tony, I was just joking with you. But he was a beautiful guy. And then at some point, when I got to a point where I needed some information, I called Clarence Avon. And LA didn't have to introduce me to him, but he did. So it's like, I don't have like, even when I left LaFace, I didn't leave for reasons that most artists leave. I left for creative differences. That was it. And even in that, even in me leaving, trying to find another label, initially LA was trying to help me find another label because I told him, I said, we started together. I think you should help me find another label. He said, all right, cool. So we tried, and nobody was like a really good fit. So then that's when we decided to part ways. But it was no fighting.
Okay. Okay. Oh, well, before we talk about you leaving the faith, let's talk about um what became the motion to say, okay, start writing and be doing your solo stuff. What is it that there was a slowdown in
Oh,
production
that
or
was a
okay.
beautiful moment.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't that. It was oh yeah, by the way, man, I have to leave in about 15 minutes because my son has a concert. But we can do it. We can do a part two if you want.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, yeah, my son, my 12-year-old son is a multi-instrumentalist, man. He plays wind instruments and he has a concert tonight.
Okay.
But what was the question you asked me?
Yeah, what was the moment to say, okay, let's start working on your solo album?
Okay. The catalyst for me wanting to do my solo album was actually my experience with Motown while I was working on Boyz II Men. Okay. So I finished I Sit Away, and all of a sudden, the A&R person that was working on their album kept asking me to change sounds in my production. And I was like, why are they asking me to do this? It's like, because I Sit Away was very stripped down, acoustic.
Mm.
It was just like some drums, guitar, little keyboard stuff. They wanted me to add pop bass on it, and they were basically asking me to change my production, and I couldn't figure out why. I didn't really understand that until I heard Water Runs Dry, and then I got it. I'm like, oh, because Water Runs Dry had that sound, y'all wanted me to change mine, even though I had done that first. Okay, whatever. So I said that was the catalyst that made me say, you know what? I think I want to do my own album. LA was like, go ahead. Because I had the studio. Everybody was away on vacation. This was like the end of 1994, like December of 94. And I had already recorded Hey Blue, Like a Woman, Billy Goat, and Grass is Green. I had already recorded those at home on my little 4-track when I would do my little demos at home. So what I did was I went in the studio and I had this Akai sampler. I sampled all of the lead vocals and the background vocals, put them into the sampler to just sort of like make it sound better, and just dropped it into the tracks. So while everybody was on Christmas vacation, I recorded words
Wow.
in 2 weeks. So when they came back, I had it. And then this was the last catch was I said, yo, LA, I gotta play this song for you. I said, you probably won't remember this, but my brother played you this song before, but you won't remember. And it was Nobody Knows. I said, but I'm gonna play you three different versions of it. I played three different versions, which is the original version, which was How My Brother Intended, which was this fusion of country and hip hop.
Like a
So
Tracy Chapman.
it was like How Nobody Knows sound, but it had like a hip hop beat on it. I
Oh.
played that one. Then I played one a little more stripped down, and then the version that everybody heard, that was the third version, which was the one that I wanted to put out, which was very folky thing,
Mm.
right? LA heard that one. He's like, "This is a smash." And I said, "LA, this is my brother played you this song 6 months ago, and you said you hated it, didn't like it." He had originally, my brother had originally wrote that song for Pebbles
Oh.
for her to sing, but they didn't
Oh.
like it. They didn't like the demo that because the guy who was singing it, he was singing like Kenny Rogers. He was like,
Okay.
all pretend. You know, some people can't hear past certain things.
Yeah.
But once he heard it the way that I did it, then it was like, wow. And so that was then we knew we had like a really great song to go on the record. And I just wanted to put Nobody Else on there because I didn't have a clue, man. I didn't have nothing to prove. I wanted to put that song on my album so my brother could make some money because of what I experienced with Boys to Men. I'm like, yo, if it does a million albums, bro, you make some nice change, you know? So it was like that. But I love the song so much. Nobody Knows for me was that I loved it so much I wanted to record it and put it on my album. That was it. That was my whole intent. I didn't know what I was going to sell on that album. I had no clue. I had no agenda other than I just want to see what it sounds like to do my own album. That was it. And then
But
that shit blew up.
you said it was your brother wrote it for about your dad.
Yeah. That whole album, all of the songs on Words is about some aspect of my father. Every last one of them. Because our father died when I was 17. My brother was 19. But
Oh.
my father was just a very interesting, cool character. So like Billy Goat is about my dad with his women. You know what I'm saying?
Ah.
My dad had plenty of women, but he loved my mother, right? And Missing You was about him. Nobody Knows. Under Her Spell. Um, Little Ones was more so about my brother Joe and my mother. And but Hey Blue, because I would like my father was such a cool character. My father used to wear hats all the time.
Oh, is that where you
My
got it?
whole the whole look from Words, which was really amazing, was this. Because when I told Perry that I was going to make my album, she said, "All right, cool. We need to work on the imaging." So the whole look with the hat
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the
yeah.
shirts, that's Perry. And what
Wow.
was ironic was Perry never knew that I had pictures of my father at 21 years old wearing the same shirts and the same hats.
Wow.
So it was synergy, you know. So she played her part in that too. And yeah, it was just really cool, man. It's like, and that album was therapeutic for me because I had not really dealt with
The loss.
grieving from a father, right?
Yeah.
So I held all that in, but that album helped me a lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's still, I mean, still a massive smash. But how did you deal with the Babyface comparison from Nobody Knows? Because it felt, I mean, for us who are fans from the outside, is that LA and Babyface is split, and he was getting somebody that sounded like Babyface. So you understand, and actually, that was the rumor that we were as fans were getting. Did that come back to you? Did you hear that? Did that rumor come back to you?
yes, that rumor did, and it still goes on to this day. Periodically, me and my brother Joe separately will have to deal with someone and correcting them. Because for some reason, it's still on YouTube. There's some people that will post up Nobody Knows, which is my voice, my
Mm.
record, and they'll have a picture of Babyface.
Wow.
Because they like case in point. I remember the first time it was on the radio in Atlanta. I heard it playing. It was Star 94. And I was pulling into the LaFace office. I heard the song playing, and I heard the radio announcer say that was the Tony Rich project. Nobody knows. It was written and produced by Babyface, and Babyface even did the vocals. I went straight up to the penthouse. They say, "Oh, Tony's here." I walk in. I said, "Hey, man, I was just listening on my way in." He said, "Yeah, yeah, it's a great song." I said, "Why did you just say that Babyface wrote and produced that song and he sung backgrounds on it?" He says, "Because you're on LaFace." I said, "No, that's not true." I said, "Here's the credits. It's sitting right here in your face. It was written by Joe Rich and Don Dubose. It was produced by Tony Rich. The background vocals, Tony Rich. So where did you get that from? Why would you say that?" He says, "I just figured
Yeah.
because you're on the face that that's that, right?" I had a phone call with Kenny Edmonds, and this was the phone call because LA said, "Hey, Kenny wants to talk to you." I said, "All right, cool." So get on the phone with him. He says to me, "Hey, yeah, I just wanted to suggest some things." I said, "Like what?" He says, "Well, I think you should do a song like Nobody Knows, but a little more black." And I was like, I said, "Well, Kenny, what are you saying? Are you saying that you want to write a song for me?" He says, "No, no, I'm just making a suggestion." I said, "Oh, okay." And that was the end of the conversation. He
Oh,
thought it should be a little more black
how does black sound? Because I'm trying to understand.
because nobody knows. Here's the thing: nobody knows it's written as a country song from
Yeah,
the rip.
like a Tracy Chapman type of vibe.
But you see what Beyonce's dealing with her Cowboy Carter album.
Yeah, yeah.
He was getting receiving backlash because the country market is very, very strict about who puts music out in their market. If you're
Mm,
not a country artist on a country label, they're not really trying to mess with that. On the
yeah.
Words album, we tried to push three songs into the country market. Nobody Knows, Missing You, and I think um what was the other one? Leaving. No, I wasn't a country artist. But
Yeah.
when Kevin Sharp covered Nobody Knows, then it was okay because he was on a country label.
Mm,
See what I'm saying? So what Kenny was saying was that, hey, maybe you should do something a little more black, something like what Lionel Richie would do. That's what he said. Clive Davis didn't like Nobody Knows at first either. He was like, "This is a black country artist. What am I supposed to do with this?" He didn't like that until we were in the top five. Then it was like, "Hey, let's have a meeting." So it's like I dealt with those comparisons. I thought that it would go away just like the Tony Braxton to Anita Baker comparisons. It went away. I understand why people make the comparisons because they listen to the tone of voice. But when you listen to When Can I See You Again and Nobody Knows, they don't sound nothing alike. But if you go off of people's memory
mm,
of, okay, we sing in the same register, we are second tenor,
yeah.
right? And then I'm on the face.
Yeah.
So they automatically assume that's all it was. So
Yeah.
I never took offense to it. I would just correct people at every chance I got. I would be like, "No, that's not the case." And they
So
assume that it's like, "Yo, I've never worked with him. So how would he do a
yeah.
song for me if we've never worked together?"
Yes, I think no, I think the what I was getting, because I went to college in Wisconsin, and it was more like LA and Babyface had fallen out, and so
Yeah.
LA was looking for somebody who sounded like Babyface to replace and to say, well, we don't need you anymore. So as I said, you're talking about a label as a radio station saying, yeah, this is written and produced by Babyface, but you can see other rumors, that you were Babyface replacement because he was going to do his Yab Yum
No.
stuff, and so we're gonna find someone else, and then
No, that's what's so funny about that was Yap Yum was not formed until I was probably at LaFace about 3, 4 years. But you know what it was that they split up way before I moved to Atlanta.
Hmm.
See what I'm saying? Like LA didn't discover me. Harry did.
Yeah,
Or should I say, let me take that back. Tim and Bob discovered me after John Sally discovered me, right?
yeah,
John Sally discovered me by me coming to his office. Tim and Bob discovered me when they came to that studio.
yeah.
And then they introduced me to Perry. So it's like I just so happened to come at a that's why LA said that he would always say whenever I see him, he said, I'm a godsend because It would have that would have proven true if me and LA had become a songwriting production duo. That wasn't the case. We
Yeah.
never did.
And you
We
only did the
just
one slipping on Boys II Men.
you see LA's name as on Tony Braxton and the Boyz II Men's album as me as the two of us producing those songs, but LA did that because he knew I was new and he knew they wouldn't really feel that comfortable.
Yeah.
So he just said, I'm gonna just put my name on it and sit in the session so you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But those comparisons, it's like still to this day, there are people that are convinced that nobody knows is that the actual recording of my voice, there are people that are convinced that that's Babyface. I mean, even saying that, oh, I saw the video, I saw him singing it live. And then you have other people that know better saying, like, all right, show me the proof. But some people just, they're like, I don't care what you say, that's Babyface. That's
Yeah.
what they say. It's insulting to what me and my brother created, but at the same time, I understand why people do that. They
Yeah.
just don't want to let that go. But the reality is that we've never worked together. He's never
Mm.
written a song. I've never been in the studio with him recording anything. I've never had dinner with him. I don't know him like that. But I have mad respect
Yeah.
for everything he's ever written because he's a brilliant songwriter. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to work together. That's it.
Yeah. I know you're
But
about to leave for the
but when you talk about great songwriters,
yeah.
he's one of them, bro.
Yeah. But
He's a great songwriter.
before you leave, were you surprised how successful that track was? I mean, going platinum, Grammy nominations. Were you surprised? Were you and your brother surprised? Like this song about our dad has just taken off like
Oh,
this globally.
I will say this. We were not, my brother, my brother knew he had written a smash. He knew,
Oh,
okay?
okay.
When I first heard it, I knew that it was. But what I knew was that when I produced it, I was like, bro, I said, trust me, bro. I'm gonna make this shit magical, right? So he knew he had written something great. I knew that production-wise, I was going to take it to another level. So we knew that, right? But what we were also, the uncertainty is how the business works in radio.
Yeah, yeah.
Once you write the song, you produce it, you don't know what's going to happen from that point because there's
Mm.
plenty of great songs that never get promoted properly.
Yeah.
And people never really know. It never goes to that mass level of success. So, but we were very, very confident that we had created something great. LA was very confident that we had something great to work with. It was just all about like, and we were on our own with it because Clive wasn't trying to support that. It was we had to go. You know what I'm saying? It's like LA believed in it. Everybody that was behind it believed in it, and we just did our thing. It was a team effort, right? And everybody played a part to create that success. And as a result of that, that created that celebrity and that stardom around the Tony Rich project. So the thing about it is that I have no regrets about how any of it went down because it was perfection.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's
Wow.
great. It was really awesome, and I'm really grateful for every part that everybody played in it.
It- 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 when I said I'm going to get ready to interview Tony Rich, they say no, his real name is Antonio Jeffers, and
That's
then
true.
Bob was saying
Jeffries.
it, Jeffries, and then Bob was saying that you there was Richards and I don't know who said no, you need to sound rich.
Oh yeah, you know what's so funny about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when it wasn't LA that said that.
I
I
was
remember
okay.
Bob said that. It was a friend of mine who's a rapper, and his rap name was Platinum. He's
Okay.
out of Detroit. And I remember the first time I played Nobody Knows demo for him of this other guy demo in the vocal. And we were driving to Detroit, and he was just like, he said, man, this is a smash. And he looked at me, he said, man, you know what? I'm gonna start calling you Tony Rich instead of Tony Richards, because you're gonna be rich, bro. That's how I wound up using Tony Rich. So when I first signed to LaFace, my name was Antonio Richards. That's my mother's maiden name. But
Okay.
my mom never used her married name of Jeffries. But when I turned 21, right before I got married, the first time at 21, I changed my last name to Jeffries so that my kids would have that name. So, but when I signed my contract, it was Antonio Richards, and then so I had decided that I was using Tony Richards, my name, and then the way I wound up using the Tony Rich Project on my albums was when I was working on Tony Braxton, Boyz II Men, Johnny Gill, whoever. I always wrote on the cassette tape anything that was for me. I wrote down like, oh, this is for the Tony Rich Project. Not like that, not that that was a name. I was saying, no, this is the Tony Rich Project. So then when it was time to do the album, I was like, oh, I'm gonna use the Tony Rich Project. Ellie was like, yo, that's dope, like the Alan Parsons Project. I was like, who is that? I didn't know. I was just like, yeah, Tony Rich Project. Even when it came down to when we sequenced the album, we sat at a kitchen table and we told a story and we just plugged each song into the story. That's how we came up with that.
Wow. Okay. Well, we still have, you've done over 7 albums, so we still have to go. So, what we may have to do is to, because I don't want you to be late for yourself.
Yeah, let's set it up as we can do it as many parts as you want.
Yeah. No, yeah. What we'll do is, I'll look at get a date that works for you.
Yeah, check your calendar. Let me know when you want to do it, and then let's do the other parts, and then you piece it all together.
Yeah, definitely. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for being a part of Halftime Chat. Please remember to subscribe, share, and comment. But most importantly, why don't you become a member of Halftime Chat? We've got amazing videos, amazing perks, and being able to support the channel. But anyway, thanks for watching. Take care.
I never participated in that category.
Somewhere in between us, or even loving us, on which I didn't miss you.
What was it like growing up?
She's still making an impact on 4 houses down.
I have a couple pieces.
Trying to get this one and that one.
That works for you, but just for me,
No, okay, you're okay.
They don't understand what Jonas Boys and Men and all spirits.